All right, we are talking about catastrophes to avoid as you step into or consider retirement. And there are certainly some landmines. So let's
Wait a
go
minute. Does
ahead
that
and
does that mean Biden or Trump? I'm not sure which catastrophe we're talking about.
no, we're not going to get political today. We're just
Yeah.
going to
Okay.
talk
Okay.
about catastrophes to avoid.
All
So,
right.
if you were driving down the road on your way to retirement, what would be the billboards, right? The caution signs that
Mm.
you need to pay attention to before you get to retirement. So,
Yeah,
let's
these
go
are
ahead and
great.
dive in.
I think it's a great topic even of it's like what not to do list. We spend a lot of our time talking about what to do, but here's some what not to do. And I think the first one, and it is just the fear that I see that people have, is the fear of outliving their money. People who are on great pensions, either they're an engineering type career that still has pensions, or they work in the public sector as a teacher, as a first responder. They tend to have these great pensions, and so their fear of outliving their money is a little bit less because they are going to keep receiving paychecks as they age. However, the fears of inflation, the fears of the world changing, the fears of what if I need a lump sum to change the roof on my house, things like that. So they have that fear. But then we see this a lot with folks who have like a 401k. They're going to retire. They have this nice built up fund, and they're concerned they're going to watch it go down and down and down as they use it, which is fine and appropriate and normal. But how long are they going to live? Are they going to live to 80, to 90, to 100? And then, of course,
again, we have clients now that are in their late 90s. In fact, a couple of them have crossed over the mark, what I call the century mark, and have hit that 100. And they would probably be the first ones to tell you, oh, no, I'm not going to live this long. I'm not going to live that long. But in actuality, they have, right?
Right.
Yep.
And it's one of the approaches that your financial advisor we take, especially for clients who have, genetically speaking, right? They have family members that have lived into their 90s. And so a more conservative approach to the plan is to extend the life. And we all know that people are living longer now than ever.
Right.
And so the concern is not just that you live long. Most people want to live healthy as long as they can, and living healthy is a key piece. But the concern that people have is I don't want to outlive my money. I don't want to have to call my kids and rely on them. I don't want to be thrown out, because I can't afford it. And so part of that, that's the broad bucket of fears. But what we're talking about today is some of these catastrophes that lead into that, things to avoid when you're thinking about that. And the first one I think is a great one is neglecting healthcare and long-term care planning. So when they think down the road, they build a plan, they do the math, back of an envelope and say, hey, I'm going to be fine. But when they start working with us, we build a model of their finances, but we always put in, we use a button, so you click it on, click it off. But we put in, what if you need long-term care? What if your healthcare delivery just requires a bit more cost in your later years of life? And it doesn't have to be every year for the rest of your life, but maybe the last 3 to 5 years, we want to build in some costs and really stress test the plan.
And I think we're kind of fighting some misinformation. AARP is probably the biggest provider of what I consider misinformation regarding long-term care. They're saying, you need lifetime benefits. You need to have it as early as possible. You need to lock in your premiums younger. When in actuality, those are wrong. First of all, you can't lock in your premiums younger unless you put a large lump sum of money and you buy what we would refer to as a paid-up policy. Most people don't have $100,000 or $150,000 to drop into a paid-up policy. So if they buy a continuous pay policy, that cost of insurance rises. In fact, we've seen in the public sector, PERS and STRS, that they increased their premiums over a 2-year period 85%. And it was a shock to the participants to say, wait a minute, I thought I was buying this when I was 50 and it was going to stay lower. That's not the case at all. So we have these misnomers that we as planners have to deal with reality because it is a cost and there's no easy answer. But I also think that we bring in practicality in the sense that the vast majority of people are not going to need long-term care beyond 2.5 to 3 years. So there is that chance that you could be diagnosed with a long-term illness such as Alzheimer's or some kind of cognitive impairment, but we have time. We would have time to figure out what that diagnosis is and how to deal with the delivery of healthcare. So a lot of times what we do is we try to be practical with people. Say, this is what you've got. This is what we got to deal with, right?
Right, and take a look at some averages, right, and lean on those when we're working through the plan. The other big factor here, especially lately, people are concerned about inflation. And, we have the cost of living adjustment that's applied to benefits like cost of Social Security, or maybe your pension has a cost of living adjustment to it. But let's be honest, a lot of times that COLA adjustment is not keeping up with the current rate of inflation. And that is concerning. I understand that somebody's stepping right into retirement, they've had their plan in place, and all of a sudden go to the grocery store is now 10% more expensive than it was last year, right? That's going to eat into your capital potentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Family dynamics are a big part of that also. I mean, if you're a single person and you're aging, your support from family is going to be zero. Or if your family has moved away, or they just don't have the capacity. So again, all these factors come into play as far as your long-term care, what happens.
Yeah. And I think the planning at these stages, the early stages, is to include it in your plan. And
Right.
for us, this ties a little bit to investing, and maybe we'll jump there a little bit. When we do planning, and I would hope a lot of financial advisors are doing this as well, is, when we build out a plan where someone's headed in their life, we don't then just take the money and throw it in the market and hope for the best, right? We do the planning to say, what do your assets need to make to kind of fulfill all the goals and hopes and dreams and protections for the rest of your life. And there are times where we will, it looks like they need very little. Okay, great. This is a great portfolio. You're set well. But then we put in this long-term care. We put in these healthcare expenses, and it sheds light on to say, well, maybe you do need some equity exposures at this level or for this reason, so that not just can you live the life and hit your goals, but also you have this protection to say, in the event you have these higher expenses, higher inflation, you're already set up for that. And investing is one of those things where it's, a penny of prevention is worth a pound of cure type thing.
Right.
We're usually, with most of our clients, we're on the move slowly, long-term approach. Let's have these assets growing towards a specific goal or purpose. So I would say part of that, when we think about this long-term healthcare, is a lot to do with your investing. And I know, Laura, you have other thoughts on, how do we adjust investing as people age?
Yeah, I think too, just to kind of go back just a tick, I think when you're walking through the planning process, you need to stress test the plan. I think, Jeremiah, you say often, actually, we want to break the plan, right? We want to get to the point where we know what would be the breaking point in terms of what you need and what your life might require, because we want to solve for that, right? We want to work backwards as best as possible, right? Everything that we could guess. And when we're talking about an investment strategy, oftentimes we talk to our clients about a required rate of return and a target rate of return, and that there can be differences between the two. So we're going to solve for what does the investable assets need to return, what's the required rate of return to meet your basic needs, and then what's the target rate of return. And that's where we get to walk into kind of stress testing the plan and or the purpose of the funds. We have many clients that say, really in an ideal case scenario, if I don't need that added extra expense in healthcare delivery at the end of my life, I want my residual funds to be for the next generation or to be for this charity. And so I want to set that target rate of return as more aggressive than if I was only assuming that it was for my benefit and my needs, right? So when we talk about an investment strategy, it's definitely not a one size fits all, right? It is a customized approach to people's plan for their money during their life, taking into consideration all those variables, but also after their life. If there are funds left over at the end of your life, what would you like to do with those funds?
Mm-hmm.
Because what comes into play is the required rate of return, the target rate of return. We're not just talking about performance, we're talking about the risk associated. And that is has to do with the client's appetite for highs and lows that no doubt will happen as you have assets in the market.
Yeah, and I think the biggest issue that I run across with people that are approaching retirement and even past retirement, and they're in it, and all of a sudden there is a bump. Let's say financially there's a bump in the road, kind of like what we're going through right now. There's a volatility. And that's where that target rate of return that you're talking about is really critical. The required rate of return is how much do you need to make on your money. The target is that excess. how much can you tolerate as far as the volatility? And you have to bring people back and have them look at that and say, you're going to be okay. The world isn't going to fall apart on you. So anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other piece of investing, and we can move on from here after this one, but I see often people when they first get to retirement, unfortunately, sometimes they have a mindset shift that goes from yesterday, I was full invested, equities, full risk. I'm retiring. And now tomorrow I want to put it all in cash because I'm not sure what the future holds. And man, wow, that is not a healthy dynamic here. As you lead up to retirement, we want to be shifting your portfolio. But at the same time, I've seen a number of folks who will start to say, I need 90% bonds at the age 65.
Right.
And we say, wow, how long do you expect to live? And we realize they're going to live to 90 or something. You have 25, maybe 30 years of growth in these portfolios that we want to still enjoy while mitigating the risk. And so the portfolio needs to be adjusted before retirement. But even with that, as you go through retirement's a long time for most people. And so to have that as built so that you're getting those required rate of returns, you're getting those target rate of returns, taking on minimal risk, but at the same time, you're not stagnating your portfolio. And that's this idea of outliving your money. We want your money to still be working for you, even while it's being protected.
Yeah, low-hanging fruit, right? Easy recommendation for our listeners. If you have retirement funds that are invested with your employer and you have, for example, a target-dated fund, we typically recommend to our clients to just extend that target date beyond your actual planned retirement date, because what happens with those target dated funds is they have a tendency to get too conservative too quickly because they're just planning for those assets to last until your date of retirement. They're not actually looking at the longer term horizon of your entire lifespan. So that's an easy recommendation for our listeners is if you're invested in a target dated fund in your 401k, go ahead and extend that target date 10, 15 years beyond your actual target retirement date.
This is kind of a segue that goes into what I consider the next big mistake that most people make, and that is claiming Social Security benefits too early. You can claim it as early. Most people are eligible at age 62 if they're not working. But it is by far the biggest mistake that we find. And the amount of benefit that you would receive if you wait from age 62 to 70, we're talking like almost 70% more in income at 70 than at 62. And it goes up 8% a year in benefit. But then the biggest objection that we get is what? Well, what if I die? Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me? The chances we're fighting people living too long, and you're coming up with, I don't want to delay my Social Security because I may die at 80 or whatever. I don't know.
Well, in addition, though, I think there's so many rules around Social Security, but I think one factor that oftentimes gets overlooked is that if it's a couple, the individual in the house that has the higher Social Security benefit or could be eligible for that higher Social Security benefit will actually benefit the household even beyond their lifetime. As long as they've been married for 10 or plus years, there's some other factors and rules in play there. But simplistically stated, if that individual waits until at least their maximum retirement age, 67 typically, or the maximum benefit is 70, that then amount will be inherited, so to speak, by the surviving spouse. And so, there's kind of a step up to that next Social Security benefit level. So it's not just about like, hey, there's cash available to me at 62. I might as well take it and invest it in the market. We hear that a lot. That's not always the right choice.
Right. And again, just a kind of a side note, at the end of Biden's administration last year, they eliminated the windfall elimination provision when it came to Social Security benefits for those people that a public pension and the other spouse was private, and how that was affected. And that's had for some of our clients, that's been a dramatic shift in the amount of income that they receive, right?
Yeah, positive benefit. Absolutely. Good news. Yeah. We like good news to share.
Good news. Good news about Social Security, right? That's a great one.
Right.
But I think that Social Security, even on going back to Laura's comment about the investments, like, it's different, right? And it's different for every person. And I think part of the dynamic is there's no one size fits all. Like you have to look at your plan and your life and decide what makes sense for you. And that's what we get to do with a lot of our clients. The other piece, I think that we talk about one size fits one, we talk about it a lot, is the risk of people overspending in their early years of retirement. They jump right in, they start spending. We're retired. We want to do the things we want to do. and then they get down the road a ways and realize, oh, we've been opening up too much.
Whoops.
We don't see this very often. I think partly because we're so much in the planning, right? We get people later in life who come to us after these issues happen, but what I tend to see more often is that people, when they retire, they have a really hard time taking any money out of their retirement accounts. Mm-hmm. They've spent so many years getting the money in there, so many years sacrificing, and now it's really hard to turn that spigot around and say, I'm going to take out $10,000 from my retirement. I'm going to take out $20,000 from my retirement accounts. And so a big piece of the planning that I think is so valuable to people is kind of like you said, Laura, of setting that, how do you break the plan, but to set kind of a minimum and a maximum. To say, hey, if you start spending this much on taking trips or hosting your family or going on, whatever adventures you might want to do, if you spend this much, you're going to have a problem. But if you don't spend this much, well, you're going to have this big chunk left over that no one's going to use. And so kind of giving them a range in the planning to say, hey, if you're spending between this amount and this amount for the next, 4, 5, 10 years while you're healthy, while you have the time, yeah, this is a great opportunity for you to really lean into some of these bucket lists and goals you want to do. I mean, I have very few clients that 80 to 85 years old, the idea of hopping on a plane and going to Italy sounds like any fun. It sounds like a hassle, and I got to sleep in someone else's bed. But at 57, at 65, at 72, wow, yeah, the idea of hopping on a plane and going somewhere exciting, that sounds great. And so for us, there's a benefit in that planning to know, hey, if we spend a certain amount over the next 5 years of travel and whatnot, how is that going to impact my future so that they're not, overspending or, I guess, candidly underspending in these early years?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing is that, clients, they have a tendency, because they're accumulating all these years. And then all of a sudden we tell them, okay, we want you to take money out of your retirement plan. We want you to take money out of the accumulation and spend it on yourself. And a lot of people, that's just a mind shift. And they're going, no, I can't do that. I have to continue to save. I have to continue to accumulate. But we really encourage people, there's a season when you need to enjoy the money that you've accumulated and you've worked hard to invest, right? Mm-hmm. And dying with a big bucket of money makes no sense. The money is a tool.
Really the goal.
Yep. It allows you to have the freedom to do some of the things you've always wished for and always wanted to do. And particularly if all the other key items are taken care of. So.
Yeah, and I can respect that, mindset. Like we have, clients that have just been diligent, working hard, savers, putting away for their retirement. And, this is where, I think that mindset of just putting away and recognizing the seasons that life brings. This is why I think sometimes the plan is helpful, because all of a sudden you see it kind of laid out in front of you over the decades and realize, okay, this season of withdrawals from the retirement accounts is just a season, because in fact, folks, at some point you're going to be forced to start taking money out of those tax deferred accounts. And this is where the tax planning comes into play, because even if you said, okay, I'm going to live frugal, meager, I'm not going to take those trips, I'm just going to keep storing away. Well, guess what? At a certain point in time, you're going to be forced to start taking some of that savings out of your retirement account because you need to pay taxes on it. And so actually evening out some of those distributions into retirement can be helpful from a tax planning perspective.
Yeah, and I think that, the conversation we have with clients is that we don't want to be a killjoy. We want you to participate, and we want you to have enjoyment with the capital and the money that you've saved. You've done all the planning right. Do it. And what we find is most of our clients we've had for a long time, even though they spend it for retirement, they make gifts to their kids, their account balances continue to grow because they're not exceedingly giving more than what the account is building up on a long-term basis.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe every once in a while we'll have that client who's kind of a spendthrift, and they've just been waiting for that moment for retirement. And sure, this is where being a trusted, having a relationship based on trust is helpful, because there are times where, as the advisor, we need to encourage them to spend, and other times we need to encourage them to slow down a little bit. So we have to be kind of a sober mind, right, in both cases. But.
So case in point, people want to make a big purchase. The sooner that we know that they want to do that, let's say a car purchase or a home improvement or something, what we may want to say is that, is it necessary right now? Can we hold off if the markets are down, if the equities have moved down like they have over the last few months, maybe it's better to hold off on that major purchase until we get a rise, because equities will go back up. That would be the time to skim off some profit and make that acquisition. So again, we're not trying to be killjoys, but the timing of those large distributions can be can really have a real benefit one way or the other on the overall portfolio.
Yeah. All right. The last catastrophe I'll throw in here, and I'll put my lawyer hat on, is failure to do any sort of estate planning. We've had a lot of clients who come to us after their parents have passed away, and then they realize their parents really didn't do anything, and they're having to work through probate, or even, I guess, harder is their parents are still alive and there's no advanced healthcare directives, there's no powers of attorney. The people that need to be caring for that generation don't have the power to do so. And so for anyone who comes in, that's our client, man, that is a catastrophe that is so easily avoidable, is to say, let's get some estate planning in place. It's not just a trust, that's a part of it, but advanced healthcare directives, powers of attorney, like there's a whole packet of things that just make that season of life so much easier.
And I'm going to layer on not just starting an estate plan, but finishing it. We have several clients who have started it, but maybe they never really funded that trust. Maybe
it's a big deal. It's a big deal, Laura.
Yeah. Anyways, sorry to cut you off.
No. They go to a seminar, or they go to church, and there's some attorney or somebody that's going to give them their trust at a discount. So they get this document, they put it in the floor, and nobody helps them really get it properly set up. What you said, your comment, funded. Nothing is more frustrating that a client will bring in their parents' trust and say, well, they have a trust. Okay, did they fund it? And they look at me with big eyes and they go, what do you mean by that? Right, Jeremiah, you can address that more in detail.
Yeah, I mean, if people don't put their house in their trust, if they don't put their investment accounts in their trust, right? It could just be an empty, it's like a treasure box, but it could just be empty and there's nothing in it and it doesn't serve its purpose. And we've had some parents of clients that even though they had estate planning, they still had to go through probate because there's a number of things, of assets that didn't get dealt with, didn't get moved into the trust. So it's a catastrophe and I think all of these are avoidable, right? That's why we call them tragedies or catastrophes, that with a little bit of planning, a little bit of forethought, all these concerns can be mitigated, they can be dealt with, and allowing the person then to that main fear we started with, the fear of outliving your money, to be confident to say, hey, I have a plan. I know I've made good choices to be a steward of what I had. I know I'm making the right lifestyle choices. I know I have safety nets. Like all of those allow you to live with so much more confidence as you walk into retirement. And that's what we get to do. That's the joy of our job, is we get to walk in with people with, their life matters, their assets and their families. And it's really important to them. We get to step into that, do some planning, and really set them up for success.
So to all of our listeners, we hope this has been helpful. We hope you recognize some of these caution signs as you step towards retirement, but ultimately they are solvable, right? And so you just need the help of a trusted advisor. So if you're looking for someone, we'd love to be of assistance. You can reach us at trichordadvisors.com. Thank you so much for listening today.
Until next week, folks, may you grow in wisdom and knowledge. Thank you for listening.
We have a few more things to let you know about before we go. Podcast reviews really help us to serve more people and get this information into the hands of the people who need it. Please leave us a review. Even if it's not 5 stars, we welcome the feedback.
And we invite you to let us know what topics you would like to hear more about, or what would benefit the people in your life who you're closest to. We have more resources online. Those resources are designed to help you share this great information easily with people in your life. To access those resources, please visit trichordadvisors.com.
Often we hear from clients that they wish they had talked to us sooner. If that's you, we'd be thrilled to see how financial planning can benefit your life. Email us at contact@trichordadvisors.com or simply click on the link in the show notes.
This show was produced by Graham Gardner at Model FA. Find out more about how to create a podcast for your financial planning business by visiting modelfa.com. We love creating content that's useful, resourceful, and maybe even a little entertaining. We want to make this mega universe of financial topics and advice applicable and helpful to your life.
Remember, at Trichord Advisors, we are your future's best ally.